Hey there, everyone. Welcome to Season 7 of the Path Podcast. This is episode 121. I'm Derrick.
Hey, I'm Jason.
And we're so excited you're joining us today. We're jumping right back into our Revelation series in chapter 17. And I had the opportunity to be in Argentina. And so Jason preached those first 6 verses. And Jason, share a little insight into what we studied in those verses.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're kind of jumping into what really is like the final section of the book of Revelation, and we with the help of some really helpful commentaries and some books that we've been using to help us along the way. Really, this last section of the book is we're titling it like the Tale of Two Cities. And so you have these 2 cities that are presented here in chapter 17, 18, and then 19 through 22. And the city that we get introduced to here in the first 6 verses of chapter 17 of Revelation is the city of Babylon. And Babylon is representative of the peak of corruption and just evil and debauchery and doing whatever you want to do. And we've seen up until this point in the book of Revelation that is a pervasive thing on the earth. That there is this group of people and these leaders who they are only concerned with themselves. What do I want? What makes me feel the best? What makes me happy? Regardless of the cost, regardless of the carnage that it causes along the way. And this whole group of people and the enemy himself, Satan, is all represented in this kingdom of Babylon. And so what we see, this was I made a joke about it when I preached, was that it's a difficult passage because you read through these first 6 verses of 17 and there's a couple things that could be a little confusing, but for the most part, it's really an introduction to the rest of the book. And so I found myself wondering, what is it that we're supposed to see in this, and I think the first thing to be reminded of, and I think it's a good thing to be reminded of as we're jumping back into the book of Revelation after taking a little bit of a break, is that the judgment of God is real. That this is not just some story that we read about. It's not God just blowing smoke in this moment, but the judgment of God is real, and it will be poured out on the enemies of God at some point at the end of time. And not only is it real, but that we could unintentionally and very easily find ourselves being the objects of that judgment if we are not following after God. And so the way that we would find ourselves not following after God would be that we fall for the deception of the world. And we also talked about in here these 2 cities are also represented by 2 women. So you have Babylon, that is represented by the great prostitute that we're introduced here. And later on, we'll see the city of Jerusalem, which is represented by the bride in the later chapters. And we talked about how this prostitute is very alluring and deceptive and can seem at first to be something to be desired, but there's some real issues under the surface. And that she is, at one point it says there in verse 5 that she is drunk with the blood of the saints, with the blood of martyrs. So while on the surface she may appear alluring, just underneath the surface is deception and destruction. And we talked about how it's the same thing for us with sin, that sin is always packaged in something that looks enticing, and just below the surface you see the destruction that sin causes. And so for us, we have to be on guard and following after God at all times. And so all of that is there in verses 1 through 6. But what's really interesting is that in verse 1 of 17, an angel speaks to John. He says, hey, let me show you the judgment that's going to be poured out on the great prostitute. And when you get to verse 6, he says, I saw her, and a lot of the way that Greek could be translated there is that I saw her and I was very confused, because the picture that John sees is of a beast and the prostitute that is triumphant over God's people. And so you could see where he would be confused and say, well, hold on, I was told that I was going to see some judgment, and I'm not seeing that yet. And that's where it begins to pour over into verses 7 through 14 that you walked us through yesterday, to begin to see that judgment that's going to be poured out. So.
Yeah, and so the angel asked John, he's like, why are you astonished?
Yeah.
You know, like, why are you confused by this? And then he says, this is the beast. And so the angel begins to interpret what John is seeing.
Yeah.
And he speaks first about this beast. And the beast is, you know, the beast from the sea, the beast from the abyss. It's Satan's mimic Christ, Antichrist. You know, it's Satan's attempt at trying to create his own unholy trinity. And you know, this is his best representation of what that unholy, you know, God the Son would be like. You know, and little g God. I'm not saying in any way Satan is a god or anything like that, but he says, you know, and then the angel kind of, it's in almost a mocking way, says he was, he is not, and he is to come. And then he says, and he will lead to destruction. Destruction will come. So, you know, though there are moments where it seems the enemy is prevailing, Babylon is prevailing, the world is prevailing, the thing that and the angel says, this is wisdom, right? This is, you have to have wisdom in this. And so that was the direction I took, was to say, okay, what does wisdom tell us? Well, wisdom tells us that Babylon will be destroyed. This world system built on this shaky foundation of this unholy trinity, it leads to utter destruction. It will be destroyed. And we shouldn't be surprised at that, because the fact that, you know, we understand this as Babylon, it's not like a new Babylon is coming necessarily. It's Babylon becomes this word picture for every evil kingdom that Satan has tried to set up, that has reared its head, peaked, and then fallen. Reared its head, peaked, and then fallen. It is the original, kingdom of Babylon. It's you know, it's what happened at the Tower of Babel. You know, kind of the first iteration of Babylon, if you will. It's the true Babylon. You know, from that we see in Habakkuk shows its demise. The book of Habakkuk, the prophet Habakkuk. So, you know, and then it's every other kingdom that has ever been opposed to Christ, been opposed to God's ways, been opposed to the Holy Trinity, if you will. It's the same old song and dance, and the angel's like, you know, what you heard will come true. It will be destroyed. Right.
Well, and I appreciate too that the angel takes the approach of like, why don't be confused, man. This is what I've been showing you all along. This is just, because one of the things that we talked about too is that this is another one of those instances where you're getting to see something that's already been described from a different angle, and it's almost like I know that this is not what the angel said, but it's almost in my mind where I hear the angel going, all right, John, I'm going to start over again. Let me know where you get lost, you know? And so he's like, we've been talking about this. You know, you shouldn't be confused that that the enemy is a defeated enemy, and he will be put down, just probably not in the way that you think he's going to be put down.
Yeah, and so, I mentioned that as well, that this is what we've said all along. It's this clashing of two kingdoms, right? It's this clashing of two ways: the
Yeah.
way of God, the way of the Lamb, and the way of this beast. And even the word picture of using beast and lamb is this conundrum type of situation to
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, I mean, you're meant to see how serious the beast and his destructive ways are,
Yeah.
and you're meant to see how it is the soft and tender slain Lamb of God that is ultimately the one who conquers this beast. It's this, it's like every story we've ever dreamed up. It's and in fact, and as I was studying, that's what one commentary said was like this beautiful, amazing, like epic story in just three chapters. And so, and it really is, and you finally, in a lot of ways, you finally see what was pointed at or alluded to in earlier chapters in Revelation coming to full fruition.
Yeah.
And even that, I think, is intentional, because if we were to see the full destruction like right off the bat, it'd be scary,
Sure. Yeah.
And Revelation is meant to inject courage into the hearts of the followers of God, the ones that the woman's at war with, that the beast is at war with, and that this passage talks about that.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think too another thing that does inject courage is that what John sees with his eyes doesn't make sense to him, and I appreciate that this is not the first time we've seen this in the book, but that every time that John has this just incredible picture that could be terrifying, an angel comes to John, or Jesus himself speaks to John and says, listen, I know what's right in front of your eyes is scary, and I know it doesn't make sense to you, but trust me. Trust me that Jesus will win in the end. This enemy will be defeated. And I think that if you take it to the context that this was originally written in the first century, you could absolutely hear this being read to believers and them saying, that's not what I'm experiencing. That's not what I'm seeing right in front of my eyes. And an angel or a pastor reading this letter to his congregation and saying, I know that what's right in front of your face doesn't seem to make sense in light of this, but trust me that God will be victorious. And I think it's a good word for believers through all of time.
Yeah.
That I know that what you're seeing seems to be opposite of what I'm saying, but trust me that that God will win in the end.
I saw a moment like this when I was in Argentina, and I shared about it in my message yesterday. A young lady named Cynthia, and we met several phenomenal university students. They love the Lord, and it's like this juxtaposed thing of this timid, almost David before Goliath, or this small thing in front of this seemingly unsurmountable giant. And and there, I'm sure we didn't meet all the Christians there are to meet, but we met some who are trying to connect with other Christians and are having difficulty in doing it.
Yeah.
In doing so, that other Christian university students are connecting with other churches and those kind of things. Praise God, but connecting among other students, and as Cynthia is sharing, what she's up against and how few Christians there are and how hard it is to exude or demonstrate your faith in this environment where similar to the United States, same kind of cultural issues that Christians are bumping up against. Our university students are bumping up the same kind of stuff. But what is a little bit different is that, in a lot of ways, evangelicalism, Christianity, somewhat still pervades our society here, though it's becoming less and less. And so there's maybe a lot more, of that evangelical witness where it has waned in years past in Argentina, and so it really does seem like this very vast thing that such a few Christians are bumping up against, and are doing so with courage, but it's hard, it's difficult. And you could feel that in the moment. You could feel that tension in Cynthia's heart, and even what she said, even though I couldn't, it was in Spanish, I couldn't understand it, but through an interpreter was hearing what she said. But I didn't need an interpreter in that moment, because I could tell what she was describing. And one of our team that went as a pastor at Johnson's Ferry, the Hispanic church that's a part of Johnson's Ferry, and his name is Daniel, and in this moment he seemed like very much like a Paul figure for me, kind of this giant of the faith. And he's Argentine, he's from there originally, he's been in the States for a while, but he and is a pastor there, but he has a heart for this country, if you can imagine. And he begins to just speak courage and same kind of things, like, I know that it seems unsurmountable. I know that what you face is big, but your God is bigger, and you're doing an amazing job, and you keep it up, and you don't get discouraged. And as he's saying these things, tears just well in her eyes and flow down her cheeks. And she says, the translation was, sorry, I sometimes get sentimental, and that was the translation. So I don't know what she said in Spanish, but translation was that she's sentimental. But it's like, man, who couldn't be in that moment? That was a very powerful moment. And I think in a similar way, that's what's happening here. Is like these Christians, seemingly small, seemingly up against this giant beast and all these things, this world system and all these things, yet this seemingly small faction of believers in these 7 churches has the power through Christ to conquer this beast, conquer this system, to conquer Babylon. And that was the third point. The point in the middle is that wisdom tells me that humanity fawns over falsity, and that's man, that it was evident as well in Argentina, that people just like, so these new initiatives that were pushed by their these political endeavors, very similar to what we're facing here, but but more recently they just passed abortion laws while these university students were in university. And they just passed similar gender laws that have been kind of floating around in the United States already. They just passed them while these university students are in university. So these become these things that rise to the top of society to say either you're for it or against it. And if you're against it, we're going to ostracize you. So much so that in Argentina, they would wear bandanas on whatever side they're on. A green bandana if you were for the abortion laws. A blue if you were for life, and for that. And even if the university student said, even if you didn't wear a bandana, it automatically showed that you weren't in support of these things. And so, so what a visible way to say, I disagree. And it's such a small minority amongst this loud crowd. And so, but that's, so what you see is that just humanity, they buy this lie, hook, line, and sinker, right? That all that life doesn't begin at conception. That you can decide whatever you want to be. It's not whatever's assigned to you at birth. That you can fall into these crazy falsities that seem so ludicrous to many of us, but to them it's like, oh yeah, well that's exactly what it has to be. And it's just like this seductress, this system has just swallowed up so many. And that's what the passage says, is that, hey, there's going to be people that whose names aren't written in the book of life, which is a way of the angel saying, who don't belong to Jesus, don't belong to the Lamb. These people that will fawn and feign over all these things, and will be astonished by what this beast brings to the table, and follow him. And so we have to be cautious of that. We have to be careful of that and understand that. As we were talking just a moment ago, I had this picture in my head of a great movie. It was originally a book, but I had the picture of the movie in my head, and that's The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yeah. And it's, the four Pevensey kids find their way into this magical land, Narnia, through a wardrobe. And the three acknowledge and understand, they get to begin to understand this idea, we're sons of Adam, we're eventually, we have a special place here. And so they're following Aslan's ways, they're, C.S. Lewis is the great allegorical writer, so it's very indicative of the same mentality, the same idea of following the right way, following the right path in the midst of a cold and dark world, because it's all frozen over by the Ice Queen, right? And but one, Edmund, finds his way to her. She taunts him, and everything seems wonderful, right? Oh, have this Turkish delight. Yeah. Come sit with me, warm yourself, here in this place, and and if you come to my palace and you bring your brothers and sisters, or brother and sisters, then I will give you all the Turkish delight you want, all these things, right? And that's what this world system promises us, is all these things, but it's lies. Right. Because as soon as Edmund gets there, he gets thrown into a prison. He's around all these noble people who have been turned to stone by this witch that, and what she is out for is destruction. Well, she represents this Babylon, this harlot, this this world system, and so it's very easy for folks to be enticed by that. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's destruction that awaits them. Right. But they don't see it, and they don't know and realize it. And so. I don't know why I had that pop in my head, but I thought that's really a great way of describing how this thing works. So
it's a great picture of how the two cities battle against each other.
And then the final thing wisdom tells us is that Christ, through Christ, Christians will conquer. And then the angel says, in verse 14. These will make war against the Lamb, right? So they're making war against us. It's not like, they want to just play, I said tiddlywinks yesterday, or like, patty cake or whatever.
Yeah, it's not just imaginary.
They're making war with us, and with the Lamb, and us by default. But then it says, but the Lamb will conquer them, because he's Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. Yeah. And so that we want to be counted among that multitude of folks that are standing with the Lamb, because that is who will ultimately find relief and will conquer, and that should inject courage into us.
Absolutely.
That it may seem like things are spiraling out of control right now, or are hard or difficult or whatever, but at the end of the day, we are standing with the one who will conquer.
And I think that's why faith is so important, because our eyes can lie to us. Like we might see something that seems to be the truth, when we have to trust that what God says is the truth, and that takes faith sometimes. And even in the face of what looks like the exact opposite of what God tells us, we still have to trust in Him, because we know that it's the truth.
Absolutely.
So, all right, well, here's where we turn it over to you. How is this speaking to you? What have you learned about needing to chase after wisdom and trust in God, and and seek after him with all your heart. We'd love to have a conversation with you. At the beginning of a new season here on the Path Podcast, we'd like to re-up that and just say, hey, we would love to have a conversation about this, not just between Derrick and I, but between Derrick and I and you, the listener. We'd love to know how we can encourage you, how we can pray for you. Maybe if you have a question that you need answered, we'd love to answer that for you here on the podcast. You can email us at thepath@lafayettefirst.life, or you can comment on this YouTube video or on Facebook, wherever you may find this. But we would love to talk with you in the days ahead. We're looking forward to another season of fun episodes, getting to look at God's Word, and eventually finishing the book of Revelation. It will happen in the next couple of months. So looking forward to that. But until next time, I am Jason.
I'm Derrick.
And we hope that you'll join us as we continue down the path.